We have heard today a lot about innovations, a lot about the kinds of things, the new kinds of things, the new technologies and all that are going on. And we talked about this some just now. And now in this last conversation, we get into really one of the most important and difficult parts of this discussion, which is how do we bring these changes, how will these things take place and still be done equitably and still be done in ways that we can share these technologies. I'm interested in thoughts that anybody has. Do we have people in the room who've worked on issues of social justice and equality and have concerns or thoughts about this? Yeah? Tell me about it.
Well, I do community organizing. I'm a student at Subaru College, and so I deal with a lot of things with labor unions and inequality in the state of Mississippi.
Inequality in Mississippi. And that inequality, is that an urban-based, rural-based inequality? Is that
urban and rural?
Urban and rural?
Yes.
Is that also demographic, African Americans?
Yes.
All right. What about immigrant populations? You have immigrant populations
There's
too?
not a big immigrant population in the state of Mississippi, but I'm sure, if it was, we would deal with that as well.
And so where are you seeing the inequities most dramatically in terms of food, housing, what?
For me, it's more with food, and it's more with jobs, right? Basically with that.
So we also know that related to this too are issues of obesity and health and childhood diabetes and all this. So this is complicated stuff. Technology is another one. If we have a strange digital divide, that is something that is exacerbated by these issues of inequality. What we want to do now is we want to take our turn to issues of equity, and I'd like to bring out my colleague, Professor Imani Cheers. Professor Cheers was part of the Land O'Lakes Global Food Challenge. She was a faculty member with it last year, traveled to Africa with the group, and I've asked her to pursue a conversation with our mayors and others on these issues of equality and making sure that we identify the issues that are the challenges here. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Imani Cheers. Hi, Imani. It's all yours.
Hi, thank you. Good afternoon. All right. So, how's everybody doing today? It's the end of the day, so it's always kind of lagging. Shout out to my 2113 students. Where you at? Okay, all right. They were required to be here, but nonetheless, wanted to make sure I saw them. So yes, I have the pleasure this afternoon of leading off our second to last discussion. We're going to be looking at equitable cities, and I have the pleasure of being welcomed. Some people you've already seen today, a couple you haven't. So I'm just going to jump right into it. I want to bring out Mayor Tommy Battle from Huntsville, Alabama. Mayor Battle, come on. Yes. Thank you, sir. We're going to bring out Miss Melodee Colbert-Kean, who is the president of the National League of Cities and a council member from Joplin, Missouri. Welcome, thank you. We have Thomas LaVeist, who is professor and chair, Department of Health and Public Policy at George Washington University. Thank you, sir. Mayor Jeri Muoio from West Palm Beach, Florida. Thank you. And finally, but not least, we have Megan Smith, who is the Director of Climate and Energy Initiatives at the Office of King County in Washington. Thank you. So let's get into it. Let's go. Thank you all. I'm so excited to be here and chat with you. So I'll start with you, Mayor Battle, if you don't mind. And really, actually, I'm gonna back up very quickly for everyone. In one word, if you could, tell me the biggest challenges when developing equitable cities in one word.
Money.
Amen, it's a good one.
As a former mayor, money.
Money, okay.
I'm gonna go with hope.
Hope, okay,
Participation.
nice.
I'm going to hyphenate so I get two. Income inequality.
Excellent. Income inequality. So income inequality, money, hope. I like it. These are definitely great terms. So Mayor Battle, how is the changing infrastructure and services, how are you guys responding to all these as Huntsville continues to grow?
Sure. You know, one of the biggest things as you grow, you've got to make sure that everybody's part of that growth and everybody's part of your prosperity. And so we work very hard to make sure that we can reach out to every section of the city, north, south, east, west, but every social economic section of the city. Right. Sometimes you'll have roadways that have turned into barriers to where people will not go over those barriers. And, and so we work on those barriers and how do we break down those barriers and how do we get into another community?
Excellent, excellent. Well, that's exciting. I'm going to come back to you. But Councilwoman Colbert-Kean, being that you discussed earlier this morning, obviously at the time of the tornadoes in Joplin, you were the mayor. Mm-hmm. And so how do you ensure emergency assistance and resilience plans for an entire city? What are some of the challenges you face with that?
Well, a lot of it has to do with communication, first of all. It's important that you have one point of communication and not everybody trying to put out their story. Mm-hmm. And then you have to make sure everybody's included by different avenues. We try to have one avenue of communication. Well, when the tornado hit, most people's TVs there was no electricity, mm-hmm. so they couldn't keep up with social media and that kind of thing. So we tried to actually have representatives from the council and from our emergency services who went to neighborhoods and gave out this information. We had little flyers, this is what we're communicating today. And so to include people in all of that, it's just important to make sure that everyone is involved, everyone is aware of what's going on. And so that's, I don't know, it's just one thing that's just very important to us. And it helped us with getting the word out. It helped with having people to be out of the way so we can clean up the debris. Mm-hmm. And that was one of our main goals, was to get that out of the way and then get about building our city, rebuilding our city.
Excellent, that's amazing. Professor, can you touch on how health and equality and urbanization are all related and how they impact each other?
Oh, certainly. You know, we're increasingly, research is showing that the differences in health status of population, the inequalities, are impacted more by place than anything else. In other words, where you live mm-hmm. determines what are the health risks that you're exposed to, as well as what are those health protective factors that you have access to. So geography plays a huge role here. And one of the aspects of this country, unfortunately, is that the United States is a dramatically racially segregated society. And also segregated by income as well. So because of that, we have these pockets of despair, which is why I talked about hope and hopefulness needing to be one of the important ingredients that would for sustainable communities.
Excellent. And yes, Mayor, can you give us details about an initiative or policy that West Palm Beach has implemented to ensure that there are equal services for everyone in your community?
Well, you know, it's always tricky, and I think if you asked any community, they would say that they were not getting equal services. Sure. Whether it's a wealthy community or a struggling community or a downtown community, I think as mayor, we always hear that whatever the community is, they aren't getting enough. So I mean, we work really hard to make sure that we address the issues in the struggling communities. And I think if you actually looked at the dollars that are being spent, the dollars are much more in some of the struggling communities than in others. We're looking at neighborhood revitalization. We have some historic African American communities that are just so precious to us that we really want to rebirth it. We don't want to revitalize them. We want to bring them back to where they were. One of the examples is we have a lounge called the Sunset Lounge, and it was a very hip place to go back in the 40s and 50s, and it's the only place the African American musicians could play in our city. We have just purchased it for something like $2.5 million. We also got a Knight Foundation grant for $170,000 to do outreach, to bring the people in to talk about what do we want to happen with the Sunset Lounge. It's a historic, important area in our city. We bought the land around it. We're talking about ideas like a jazz park and things like that, but we want to hear from the public. So fortunately, we got a Knight Foundation grant, and that $170,000 is just for community outreach. Tell us what you want to see here. Let's design it. Come together and talk about what it's going to look like and what you want it to look like. So, we're always struggling to make sure we're doing the right thing and addressing the issues, but this is something that I'm particularly excited about.
Excellent. And I have a follow-up, but I want to bring in Megan Smith, and then I'll follow up. But in particular, Ms. Smith, as areas urbanize and develop, populations are being priced out of the area, which actually kind of leads into my follow-up. But how is King County in particular making sure that residents can still afford the services?
Okay, I'd highlight two initiatives there. When we do our transportation planning, I was mentioning in the earlier panel, we've got a big proposal for light rail. And a very active transit system. One thing we're doing very intentionally is doing planning around those light rail stations, transit-oriented development, and committing to build units of workforce housing in those areas. Wow. And I think in general, if you're building a system with really strong transit and light rail and tying that in with your land use planning, you're making sure that in your urban centers, you have the jobs, the educational opportunities, economic opportunities, so that people can live and work in the same place, and at the same time being very intentional about that housing piece so people are not getting priced out.
Sure. Just out of curiosity, who here is familiar with Washington, D.C.? Okay. Anyone familiar with the Howard Shaw neighborhood? A couple people? Okay. My question for all of my panelists, feel free, anyone, is there a difference between revitalization and gentrification? Or are we just playing word semantics? Anyone?
This is something that we're struggling with. Go ahead. You can. Go ahead. You look like you were going to answer that.
Well,
I'll let you
I'm the only non-mayor, I guess, here. Put it on. You and I guess. Put it on me. I do think so. I think conceptually they can be different. I'll give you one example. In Baltimore in the 1990s, Mayor Schmoke, as part of the Hope 6 program, imploded the Lafayette Court Housing Projects, one of the massive housing project that was built in the 1940s. Deplorable conditions there. But they did it in a way that I thought was smart, and smarter than the way he did it in other parts of the city, in fact. So what he did was actually, they moved the residents out into temporary housing, they imploded it, they built new housing, but they did not do mixed-use housing. They didn't do market price housing. They brought the residents that lived in Lafayette Court, only former residents were eligible to come back. Now, there were fewer units, so not everyone could come back. Sure. But only the residents from Lafayette Court were allowed to go back into that new community with better quality housing. So it didn't fundamentally change the character of the neighborhood in terms of who lived there, but it did lead to better housing conditions.
Okay. That's a great example, because I think one of the things that we're seeing in Washington, D.C. Are situations that the revitalization results in an income disparity, in particular with housing.
Including in Baltimore. So that was one example, but there were other examples in Baltimore that had very different outcomes. So I don't want to suggest that they got it exactly right there.
Of course. And I'm curious, and this is also, I'm just going to throw this out for anyone who would like to answer, but similar, I know there's Orcalif.
Yes.
Did I pronounce it right? Okay. And a number, I don't know if anyone's familiar with Orcalif. Anyone? Maybe? Someone? No? One person? You'd probably do a way better job explaining it than I would.
So I'll just quickly, about a year ago, we established a low-income fare program in King County. So it takes our fares run up to about $325 for a peak period bus ride. And we were raising our bus fares, and they were getting to the point that, people could not afford them. And so we have a low-income fare program. It's $1.50 a ride. It's pretty seamless across light rail, bus, our passenger ferry. People get that card. They maintain that card for 2 years, and then there's an eligibility check again if they continue to have that card. And so it was just making sure that people continue to have access to that system.
Excellent.
And I would just echo what what she said. We have a program also with our trolley system, and for low to moderate income people are able to get coupons, and they utilize those for the stops that they need to go. And it's also used in our taxi service. So we have the coupons for that also that help the low to moderate income people.
Excellent. Is there anything like that, Mayor Battle, in Huntsville or also in West Palm Beach?
We don't run the regional transit system, but I'm pretty sure there is a low-income fare. I just wanted to sort of go back to that question about revitalization and gentrification. I think it's a question that we're asking ourselves as we move forward with some of the things we want to do, and that we always have to ask about. But we've been working in a couple of neighborhoods where home ownership is very low, like 9%, and we've wanted to increase that home ownership. So what we found is that the city owns a lot of property, and we didn't know exactly what we owned until a couple years ago when I said, I want to know, I need a spreadsheet, I want to figure out a GIS and where all these properties are. So now we have a pretty good handle on all the properties we own. So we are turning them over for free to Habitat for Humanity. We're turning over to developers who might want to build a moderate income or workforce housing homes. And that's the way we're doing our infill development and bringing the private sector in or the not-for-profit sector in to develop those properties so that we don't get higher priced homes in there and keep them affordable to the people who are living in our city.
I think she's right. We're all kind of struggling with that issue right now. We're remodifying and revitalizing neighborhoods, but by revitalizing neighborhoods, you want to pick them up and you want to make them better. And when you have neighborhoods that is a majority of the housing is rental, as you pick up those rental houses and improve those, most of the time, you will get somebody to come in and buy, and we will do something. Sure. We'll do low-income down payment assistance. We'll build a house with a chodo that will keep it within the range of where it should be in that neighborhood. Sure. But the people who end up moving in are not the people who are renting. Right. And so your second question is, where are the people going who are renting? Where are you going? Right. And you have to look at the downstream effect of everything that you do, especially in revitalizing neighborhoods. How are you revitalizing? Are you picking them up? Then what's the downstream effect of where are the people going? If they're not staying in that neighborhood, where do they move to? And are you providing adequately for that?
That's a great question, and it's actually one that here in DC we're having this conversation. As many of you have come into the city, you might have noticed that there's lots of construction, lots of new condos, and the average price is roughly somewhere around $600,000. Wow. I'm not sure who exactly can afford that, but they keep building them, so somebody's buying them, apparently.
No mayors live in
That's how you're
We just had a condo that's going up in our city where the cheapest condo is $5 million.
Wow.
And they go up to 18 million. So it was
So we're still cheaper than that.
I want to know who's,
All right.
I want to know who's buying those.
Very valid point. I would like to, and for the, definitely, I know I have to respect time. We have a couple of our panelists who have flights to catch, so I want to make sure that they make that. But for everyone, also, I'll just throw it out there. How do we tell a compelling, engaging visual story of inequality in our cities? How do we do that? I'm a storyteller. I like to tell stories.
I actually brought, I only have one copy here, but we use
good
infographics a lot.
I
And it
teach
kind of
infographics.
starts off telling the story. One way to tell the story of King County is that when you look nationwide, we have higher than average income, health outcomes, educational attainment, all these awesome things, access to parks, all these things. But when you really go into the numbers, and you were talking about zip code matters, place matters, huge disparities in all those areas. And so I think it's really important when we tell that story is, you tell your overall story, but you got to tell the story for all the communities in your county area and start to think about, okay, how do you work upstream to address those inequities throughout the area? So encourage people to check this out on our King County website.
Awesome.
We had the situation where there was an inequity in where you lived as to your outcome in education. And that's something that we all look at, because education drives your ability to grow. It drives your community's ability to have a standard of living. And so we had a non-traditional superintendent come in, and the first thing he did was issue everybody third grade and up laptops. And everybody was saying, what is the big deal with that? But it took care of that. It solved that digital divide that we had in the community. You had the families who did not have the wherewithal to have a computer at home, the families that did, the kids who didn't, maybe they got to see a computer once every 2 weeks. And if they were working in the computer lab, and now they have them 24/7. And we're seeing a huge change in that. You take that and then couple it with a rezoning that we just did to bring equity into the system. I think you're finding a system that really works, and you're seeing some lower economic kids who probably would have been left behind, and you're seeing them come into the system.
That's exciting.
And to piggyback off the mayor also, we also, after the tornado, had all of our high school students were equipped with MacBooks.
Wow.
All of these students don't have broadband or Wi-Fi. So you give these MacBooks, but then you're creating that inequity again because they don't have access to Wi-Fi. They have to go to the library, or they have to go somewhere and tap into Wi-Fi. Well, how do they get there? A lot of them don't have the vehicle. Their moms at work, they're from single family homes or something like that, where a parent is working. How do they get there to get access? So you have to be careful with that. And we have that going on in Missouri, in Joplin, Missouri anyway. But as a representative of the National League of Cities that represents over 19,000 cities, you have to realize that that is widespread in our communities today. It's an unintentional divide.
Right. And net neutrality is really important.
Yes.
And one of the things that we did, we saw this coming as we did, and we put Wi-Fi into each of our public housing units. We put it in all of our community centers. And quite frankly, we talked to a lot of the churches in the area, and we asked them to open up for study halls and things and have Wi-Fi availability. But it is something, it's an unintended consequence. All of a sudden you've got a digital. If you don't have the access to that digital platform, you can't make it.
And I think that's where we see some of our greatest inequities. We have a county-wide school system, so the cities don't have any say in what's going on in education, except for the bully pulpit that the mayor has. And I'm an educator. I worked in schools for a number of years. But the best predictor of achievement is zip code. Right. And what we found is the 4 lowest performing schools in the county are in our city. And we were having young families moving out of those neighborhoods because they were looking for better schools. So this year we entered into a really unique agreement with the school district. We entered into a memorandum of understanding between our city and the school district that we would work with the lowest performing school, one of our schools, and that we would bring the private sector and the not-for-profits and the city together to impact that school. So we got 2 preschool classes open in that school. It didn't have preschool before. We got Comcast to give computers as well as broadband to 75 families. We got a brand new after-school arts program instituted there. We got a private donation of $30,000 to do a conscious discipline program in that school that they wouldn't have been able to have if it weren't for this private donation. And I can go on, but it's just really fun to be able to pull all of these different people together and say, come on, we're going to make this school better. And that's what they're doing. I can't wait to see the results.
Excellent. That's very exciting. I'd like to open it up if there are any questions from the audience before some of our panelists have to leave. Yes, sir. please stand up and introduce yourself? There's a mic right behind you.
From SUNY ESF, and you all mentioned that one of the drivers would be, well, one of the block parts is money. Why not education? I guess there's no need of money for education for the most part. So why can't that be the solution?
Can you repeat your question, please?
Okay,
I think I heard it properly, but I just want to make sure.
I mean, you say that one of the hardest problem to face is money.
Yes.
But for education, for the most part, you don't need money.
We do.
Oh, yes,
We
we
do.
do.
I was like, yeah.
We're woefully
I know.
underfunded.
Public education still costs
Yes.
Absolutely.
Taxes.
a lot.
And Florida is one of the lowest.
Adapted to fit a more sustainable and more equitable point of view.
Can we agree that education is also a challenge in creating sustainable cities?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Hold on.
So just recently I saw a really impressive piece from Mumbai, India about an impoverished community there that was just abject poverty from any outside perspective. And the piece took someone into that community, and what you saw instead was a community that was intensely enterprising. Family enterprises, small consortiums. I'm just wondering, is there any equivalent in modern American impoverished communities where enterprise, personal enterprise, is an important way for those communities?
Thank you. That's a good question. Would anyone like to take a stab?
I think the professor needs to answer
I
that
think
question.
you keep picking on me. I think there is a tremendous amount of enterprise in urban America, and you know, I grew up in and still do a lot of work in one of the poorest urban areas in this country, in Brooklyn, New York, a neighborhood called Brownsville. Lowest life expectancy, highest mortality rate, highest rate of poverty of anywhere in New York City. And what you'll find there is that people have been extremely creative and enterprising in the way that they have adapted to poverty, finding ways to survive and even in some cases thrive in an environment that is not conducive to human survival and thriving. So I don't think the value of enterprise, that cultural value is there. It's really the lack of opportunity to express that sense of enterprise in a way that is acceptable within the legal economy and can lead to people finding a way out. When I began the panel, I said my single word was hope. And I think that what you find in communities like that is a great deal of hopelessness. So if you're 15 years old and you're not convinced that you're going to survive to be 20 years old, then the likelihood of you engaging in risky behavior dramatically increases, which creates a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So what we need to do is understand that the value is there. It's nothing wrong with the people, something is wrong with the environment. And if the environment was more healthy, it would produce better outcomes for people.
Thank you. So do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, just
very
to
quickly?
follow up on what he said. Recently, we just had last week in Florida, as part of the National League of Cities, Big Ideas for Cities. And we had some mayors or council members who came in and was talking about that kind of problem that's going on. We had the mayor of Compton, California. And we all know when you first think of Compton, California, you think, oh, I mean, that's the first thing you think of. Well, she addressed some of the challenges that have been going on and how she gathered the gang leaders, the leaders of a lot of the prominent gangs there, and gathered them all together in a setting similar as this, but low profile, and got ideas from them. They came and they gave ideas on how they could better their community. And they have reduced the crime rate, reduced the murders and the crime rate by 58%. Wow. And that's huge in Compton, California, huge. And she did it in a little, like 2 years.
Amazing.
And so she has a 12-year plan that she's working on, but it just gives ideas of how, what you said for your question, on how the business enterprises or enterprising is helping out in communities when you don't have the resources.
Well, that is an excellent place for us to end this panel and talking about innovations and stories. So I want to thank my panelists again. Thank you so much. Thank you. Have a safe flight.
Thank you so much.
Stay with us for 1 minute. First, I want to thank Imani Cheers, Professor Cheers, for doing this. And secondly, I'd like to welcome Professor LaVeist for joining us at the GW family. He's a very new member here, and we're delighted to have you at the School of Public Health. So thanks for being part of this. But I have one video I want to roll in, and you guys can quickly respond, and then you got to run and get your
They
train.
both have to go.
You both go.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I don't want to get in the way of that.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank
We'll be
you.
in touch.
Frank, thank you so
Mayors, so wonderful of you to join us. So this video, where are our Tougaloo students? Okay, this is a Tougaloo video, Saving Our Farms, Saving Our Families, on the subject of farms and urban equity. It's by Andre Carter. Is Andre here? Andre and your peers, because this is a joint project, group project, right? Let's quickly roll this and see what they did. Clip from the Saving Our Farms.
Significantly affects the production of natural and freshly grown produce. As the city gets larger, so does its food industry. Studies have shown that the increase of fast food chains within the cities have been connected to high rates of obesity and other health-related issues.
A lot of children have, obesity in our state of Mississippi, and because of that, we're having children diagnosed with hypertension and diabetes even in their teens. So this is such an important topic because, health is everything.
So the issue is obesity in the cities. This is a problem. This is a disparities issue.
It absolutely is. I mean, obesity is the linchpin, really. It's a driver of many of the leading causes of death are fundamentally what results from obesity. So,
Did it surprise you when you were working on that piece, what you found and the numbers you found in that piece?
Yes, sir. In Mississippi, we have Mississippi has one of the highest rates.
Grab the mic there.
Hello. Mississippi has one of the highest rates of obesity in the United States of America. So when we were told that the reason why we have the highest obesity rate is because we have more fast food restaurants than we actually do our own farms, it surprised all of us.
Wow.
And a lot of that has to do with convenience store foods, and those are put predominantly in lower income neighborhoods. And instead of supermarkets with and I don't mean Whole Foods brand, I mean whole foods and healthy foods. Right. And so until the community as a whole can address things like that and quit putting the liquor stores and the convenience stores in the low income neighborhoods, then you won't have, it'll help address that kind of an issue that's going on.
Again and again, we heard this issue of disparities, food deserts, these urban issues on urban food that students reported. So thank you very much for doing that, and many others did. And if you want to see that piece and others, go to planetforward.org and find them. Let's thank our panel now, and we'll move on to the next thing. Do you want to say something? No. Thank you very much. Megan, thank you so much. Megan flew all the way here from the Pacific Northwest to be with us, so thank you so much.
Take public transit.
All right.